Okay, why don't we get started? We continue with semantics. That's the S that's part of Endorse 2025, semantics. And very critical when it comes to differentiating between different languages, even within a language. And with more on that, we have Riitta Alkula, Chief Specialist of Interoperability, Digital and Population Data Services Agency, Finland. And as you're listening, please, those of you here and those of you online, please think of some questions you might want to ask via Slido, and you can put them in right now if you want to. So Riitta, please, semantics matter in every e-service situation, right?
Thank you. Yes, and of course we are talking about meaning of the meaning. So in that sense that in this conference talking about semantics is of course no-brainer, because we all know the problems that we have with the meanings and what we are saying, and do we mean the same thing and so on, so that's no-brainer. And also regarding interoperability, we all think that, okay, that's very important. Of course it is. That's why we are here. But it's not so easy to agree on common definitions in practice, so that we all know that we have different experiences, different domains, and so on. So this is the challenge, and normally the solution is, of course, that we use language-independent codes and classifications, so that we don't have to take care of the language as such, because we use codes. For example, it's a no-brainer that we use, for example, codes to shorten or create the postal codes or zip codes, so that, for example, Finland, we have two official languages, Finnish and Swedish, so that we have every address in both languages. And if our Swiss colleagues would be here, they would say, oh, we have even more languages. So that that's the way that you present something in language-independent way. But anyways, that's still difficult to agree on the definitions and so on. So that my point is that we need tools to help that in making those definitions, because if you just think things by yourselves, it's very difficult for others to understand what you are saying or thinking or meaning, so that we need tools to make these things visible. So my presentation is about our tool sets and how we are going to implement those things. Or actually we have implemented, because our system is, let's say, about 5 or more years when it started. So that our reference data tool is now the item today, and it's a cloud-based service and platform, so that we can create, manage, publish, share common code lists and reference data there. And the users can either create very simple code sets, or they can create hierarchical code sets and extensions also, or variants of code sets. And this is a public website, so that everyone, like any one of you, can go there and browse those descriptions and also download them in, for example, Excel or JSON format. So that the idea is that in that way you don't have to copy the definitions or descriptions by hand, but you can download them. If you're, for example, building up an information system, you just load the definitions from our portal, and no typing errors or that kind of thing when compared when you are doing with PDF specifications, for example. And one thing is also that we have methodology back there, so that the principles are that we are doing the modeling in data, and we should reuse data as much as possible. For example, why would we all, for example, if we have a form and we have two options, yes and no, why would we all need to create a code set saying yes and no options? It's easier to reuse them if someone has already done that kind of thing. So our reference data tool is one of the family of multilingual tools, and we call that the FI platform. And the idea is also that the specifications there are also both human and machine readable. And that's like yesterday we heard that the definition should be human readable because then they will also be good for the AI or language models. But you will also need machine readable things like URI identifiers so that you can identify the resources also by machines. So in that sense, we think that it's important to have both the descriptions, but the identification is even more important. And regarding those linked database principles, there are linked data means that there will be connections to everywhere, not only in your own system, but anywhere in internet. Reuse is so that we don't want to reinvent the wheel again. And then the universal identifiers. So, for example, we provide those both for the code sets and as well as to the individual codes, so that you can say URI address for a specific code. And one thing is also that the resources should be resolvable, so that they are not when you are linking to something, there is something at the other end, something else than just a PDF file. So there are the methods in more detail, but the idea is that we should be consistent in using those semantic specifications. And also regarding the data models, we have visual interface, so that the idea is also that the users don't need to know anything about the technical specifications. If there are, for example, OWL or SCOS or shackle behind the skins, they just see the textual description and visual picture of the specifications, but they don't have to know what is the technicalities inside. But if they want to get the technical things, they can also export the technical descriptions, so that that's not totally hidden. But in general, we have 3 tools, and the idea is that terminology tool, you can explain concepts there. And reference data is, of course, what we are talking about, code sets and classifications. And if the reference data is based on words, tokens, then we can also use terminology concepts there. For example, what do you mean with chip code when you are making those chip code lists? And then we have also the co-vocabularies and application profiles, that is to say data models, and also the data models use these reference data as where the attribute values come from, and also that the terminology concepts can be used when you define classes. So that if each of these tools can be used independently, but the idea is that they can also work together as a suite, so that you can define different kind of things in different tools. But regarding how we have used those tools, for example, first use case is standardized financial reporting codes. so that in Finland our Ministry of Finance want to see what is going on in the municipalities or in the well-being service countries. The counties are sort of healthcare and social services regions, so that they must report their financial data to the state treasury and Ministry of Finance, so that we can see who is doing well and who doesn't, and if there is some kind of compensation needed or so on. And every year they are publishing new code sets, but currently there are about 50 different kind of code sets that are used to follow the financial status of each municipality or the healthcare region. And the municipalities load the information either in Excel format, or they can also retrieve them by the API interface. So that the idea is that we want the information, the XBRL information they are providing, we want them to be consistent, so that all the municipalities or regions use the same kind of information. And also we have a different kind of extensions like that, what municipality is part of which region, and what if you have region, what municipalities are in that, so that we can make that kind of linkings. And also the idea is that there are already, our tool is multilingual. When we had discussed much during these days about the many languages of European Union and how we deal with that. Well, we in Finland already have 2 languages, and sometimes we also have the code sets and whatever resources also in English, so that there are 3 languages. And our tools you can say what is the language you are using, so that in principle you can use any language there. For example, there are Finnish forestry, and they had some Russian terminology, so that they store the information in Finnish, Swedish and Russian, so that all the different code sets are also possible. Well, that's about the descriptions, but one thing I think is very important is the case of unrealized costs, because that is something that you are aiming to, because now we have discussed on how much does it cost to make common descriptions and harmonize things. But then the problem is that the costs that we save when we are doing that kind of harmonizing, that's not so easy to describe, or what is the return of investment. But for example, when we established those well-being service counties, then the legislation didn't have any coding for them, so that we noticed that, okay, we have at least 3 organizations, agencies that are going to code those regions. And then we perhaps we could make a common code set instead of that we all make our own. And we did that, and well, now no data mapping is required because we use the same code set. So that's what I think that is the best cost savings we get when we are not doing the same things many times. And also other things are, but of course we don't know everything, because we don't know what are the costs that we already have saved. But for example, also we have Finnish service catalog, and its code sets are described in our system. So, but about the summary, so that I have described our tools, but the main thing is perhaps the intellectual effort we need to know, because everybody, well, interoperability is really important, yes, but how we do that. And one problem is that users that do or make the descriptions, they pay the costs, but the users are those who benefit. That's a very common problem with this everything. Well, I said about the redundant work, so that we avoid that. That's important. And also the point that we need proper tools so that we can visualize and see what we have, so that we know that, okay, that is already done and fine and dandy, so that we don't do that again. But one thing is also that I think that the linked data, semantics and knowledge graphs, they are only now starting to hit home. And we have done that for 5 years, and many have said, why are you doing that, or isn't that slow, and whatever. So that it's nice to know that, okay, now also others have seen that there might be some benefits with this kind of approach. But anyways, one important thing is that we need to have a common governance model and method, so that we know how to harmonize and how we reuse things and specifications. And for that we need communities. We need to do this together. And because it takes time to create that kind of communities, that is something that we should start now. And I mean also the broader discussion on semantic information model and the context of cross-border information exchange. For example, our tools have been used in Nordic cooperation, but I think that that is also important also elsewhere, and in that sense, I hope that we will, and the Commission will help us in that respect.
Riitta, thank you very much. A big hand to Riitta. So we have a couple of Slido questions. What strategies, if any, have been implemented to engage communities and subject matter experts in the development and maintenance of semantic specifications? What strategies are you pursuing for that?
One thing is, of course, volunteering. There are people that are interested in this, and that is the slow way. And then some do the legislation, so that, for example, we have in some areas, like in construction or the building, they have some kind of legislation that you have to do this, you have to use these tools in order to publish your specifications. So that's not a common approach, but some of the ministries have done that, so that I think that that's the best way.
Okay, very good. Any questions via microphone here? Okay, if not, has the FI platform explored integrating and reusing EU vocabularies within its suite of tools to ensure semantic interoperability, particularly across different European languages, to reduce costs?
Yes, we have done, for example, when the ISA square described those core vocabularies, and they weren't open or, let's say, resolvable, then we made our own description, so that we have so-called core models. And some that made in Finland application profiles, they used those core vocabularies in order to derive definitions from them. Currently, the situation is better regarding core vocabularies that the European Union provides, but I have complained many times that GitHub is not resolvable, so that I would like to have that kind of resolvable resources in European Union, in that sense that then we wouldn't need to duplicate the core vocabularies in our service, but we could just link to the European Union resources.
Great, thanks again.